Hi, welcome to Morning Talk Show. Today, my conversation with Tim Freke, Freke. Tim is a philosopher from England, and he's got quite a long history, a lot of books that he's written. He has a concept called Unividualism, which I found particularly interesting, and we discuss in the conversation. He has worked to kind of fill the void of spiritual practices that we're kind of experiencing in this kind of day and age. And he came to my attention because he had interviewed Iain McGilchrist, Rupert Sheldrake, and Ken Wilber. So I thought, wow, anybody who has access to those three guys must be interesting. So I checked him out. Turns out he's very interesting. He's a handsome, dapper British gentleman, and I really enjoyed this conversation. I hope you do as well. If you do, like and subscribe so that you can hear about more of this kind of content. So now my conversation with Tim Freke. Some beauty.
Oh my God, yeah. It's I'm so pleased. You know, it's such an amazing process.
Yeah. That's I find like I'm not actually designated a philosopher of any kind officially, but having kids threw my philosophical brain into absolute overdrive. I don't know if you had that same.
Oh, the minute. Yeah.
It's so many things that were sort of passive beliefs in my mind. It was like, oh shit, I got to get these have to be real or gone because I don't have room for them anymore. Or something like that.
It was a huge. The biggest transformation for me was it kicked me out. I mean, I was on my way out anyway, I guess, but I just knew that what I think of as negative spirituality was over for me. There was no way anyone, you know, when I held that little girl in my, just saw her open her eyes for the first time. There was no way that anyone was going to tell me life was an illusion. Nothing really mattered.
Right.
The self was something to avoid. None of that was gonna work for me anymore.
Oh, very relatable. I guess we're going here. But what I also found, you said negative spiritualities. I'm from a Christian background, and it interestingly, I wouldn't actually call what I had in my. It says I have an unstable connection. Let's see. Are we back? Okay. I wouldn't call it necessarily negative spirituality, but maybe mislabeled, like things that weren't spirituality that were being labeled as spirituality or something. I realized, whoa, this isn't even spirituality that I'm involved in. You know, I don't know if that resonates with you at all.
What sort of thing do you mean, Aaron? Explain what you mean.
Let me think. Well, I guess a lot of the ways in which I was being encouraged to connect with God, to connect and experience God, were very cluttered, very a lot of effort, a lot of striving, a lot of shame from my side in how to experience God, that I was just never, there is we had to be still and know that I am God, which is a wonderful verse, but I was never still, and I don't know how much of that was me and how much of that was my conditioning or my environment. I just realized I was putting a huge amount of effort into it, and not having an experience of anything kind of transcendent or something like that. Anyway, wow, we really got going right off the bat without any introductions or anything. Tim Freke, it's so nice to meet you. So nice to see you, and I really appreciate you agreeing to be on this podcast. I'm Aaron, as you know, and I like to first tell a guest what made me want to have them or feel the need to have them on the podcast, as in your case, just a yearning to connect with you. And then have you explain a couple things in your own words to catch people up. I'm hoping my channel will be kind of a collection of things that are kind of forming my worldview as I go. and just see if that resonates with people. So for me, I was looking around on YouTube as I'm wont to do while I'm working, and three people that I've really been excited about over the last couple of years are Ken Wilber, Iain McGilchrist, and Rupert Sheldrake. And lo and behold, there was this handsome, dapper British gentleman talking to all three of them. So that, whoa, who is this Tim Freke guy sitting down with the titans? Like the absolute, to me, those guys are at the very top of whatever's been on my mind. So then I looked into you, and not only were those conversations enlightening, but I discovered that you had this this term, Unividualism, that crystallized one of the big kind of itchy spots in my brain. I don't know if that's a way to describe it. For the last few years, is this tension between the collective and the collective and the individual that seems to be at the heart of a lot of our arguments these days. So yeah, would you briefly describe Unividualism? Do you have an elevator pitch for that? Or is it that's too
well,
big?
It's a very big thing.
Yes,
but
yeah. Okay,
but I'll give you. I can give you the essence, which is I can give you the idea of the unividual. Is an individual conscious of the unity of all things.
Yeah.
So it's an individual conscious of unity, and I wanted a name for it, and so I chose Unividual because I think that we're in an evolutionary process, and the next jump is going to be from this intense individualism that we've been through for the last few hundred years, now into a unividualism. And what I like about that, Aaron, is it doesn't say get rid of the individual.
Yes.
And when we jumped straight into this conversation, I talked about my little baby girl. That was part of that transition. Before that, I'd been involved with forms of spirituality, which really were saying that the individual had to go. You know, the thing that was in the way of me realizing God was me.
Right.
And my experience has never been that, and it's certainly not that now.
Right.
It's actually, I think you can enter these profound non-dual states from the individual, and it includes, to use one of Ken Wilber's lovely phrases, it transcends and includes the individual. Yes. So what I wanted to do was develop a philosophy which could account for this process we're in, and that's what Unividualism is, the whole philosophy, which leads to us becoming unividuals. It's a practical but also philosophical understanding.
Right. And I've never been fully involved in any practices or philosophies where it was required to kind of think that the individual doesn't exist or to remove your individualism. But I've heard it enough in conversations with people I really respect that it had a welcome unseating effect on me in the way I was viewing individualism. Because I think it's a really valid thing to ask yourself what it means to be individual, you know, and not because I think that's the knee-jerk reaction is, of course, I'm an individual, you know, I'm me, and I'm forming myself out of stone, and there's a lot of gray, you know, there's in what an individual is. That's my perception anyway, but that's kind of a beautiful thing, kind of the ambiguity of what the individual is. Does that resonate with you at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think often people think we're too individualistic. To be honest with you, I think we're not individualistic enough. That there's still most of humanity gets born into a culture and never ever leaves it.
Right.
Never doubts it. They just exist within a collective mindset. The great thing with individuation, certainly in the deep sense that someone like Carl Jung used it, was that we become ourselves, and we do that through doubt. Through questioning. Everyone grows up through a set of ideas. That's how we come into the world. And then you have to make them your own. And that requires you to stand back and doubt them and carry on with the ones that work for you and let go of the ones that don't. Right. And that's a lifelong process. I'm still doing that now. And that's how we individuate. And the thing which I've noticed is that far from becoming, the more individual you become, actually the more conscious you are, or you're conscious of more, not less.
Right. No, that's true.
So,
those who have more will be given.
Yeah. So the great irony, I think, or the paradox at the heart of the sort of spirituality that I'm now exploring, is that to experience the one, you need to become more of a someone.
Right.
You actually, that's the process. You become more and more yourself. And then through that, as well, not instead, you can enter these deep non-dual states and realizing,
Right.
oh, hang on, I'm the universe's Tim meeting the universe's Aaron. Great.
Right. Yeah. Isn't it interesting? Because what you're saying is spurring some thoughts that we feel we're too individual, and I almost think we also pride ourselves in Western culture on our individualism. But isn't it interesting that the almost universally acknowledged poison of social media is the comparison that it causes. It is the angst that it causes about who we are. Daily, minute by minute, scroll by scroll, people are comparing themselves to the lives of others. You're immediately questioning your individuality based on what other people are doing.
It feels like if we could just grasp, firstly, just to be absolutely clear for you and anyone listening to this, is that what I'm not saying is it's a good idea to be egotistical or selfish or anything like that. I think we need to transcend those things.
Right.
But ultimately we need to use the individual as a platform to reach out with this all-embracing love, so we really deeply connect.
Right.
But to do that, we need to become more ourselves. And the great secret, it feels to me, with being an individual, I now feel as I'm getting older, is that every single person is better and worse than me. Because depending on what I choose, some people are taller, some people are shorter, some people are smarter, some people aren't, some people are older, some people are younger. Any criteria I choose, I will be somewhere in relation to everyone. So those judgments, it all depends what question I ask.
Right.
But what marks me out as unique is that I am this particular set of qualities which no one else has, and so are you. You're your own. And so that whole vortex of comparison dissolves into the uniqueness of every individual's journey, the way their particular soul forms.
Yeah.
And that feels like great. Then we don't need all of that. We can just allow that. We can delight in the differences.
Yeah, and that's it's really hard to do it. And just when I think I'm delighting in differences, something will come up that just riles me right up inside, and then you go, interesting. Well, why was that huge emotional response happening based on that person? Why can't I forgive them for the crime of being human? Just some instant reaction that I'll have, which is a good reminder, I suppose. But the other thing I have found when I've, I feel like saying through grace or whatever, when I've had the ability to accept someone for what they are and to just be present with them, you bring out what they are more. It's not just that you get more of yourself. You get more of other people when you follow this method, and it would be
absolutely
in those moments of connection. Oh, sorry. Did you have something to say?
No, please. That's beautiful. In the moments of connection.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a huge part of what I do, is about connection.
Yeah. And in those moments of connection, it would be very strange to say, oh, by the way, there's no you.
Yeah.
That would be, I was watching, oh, sorry, go ahead.
So, no, please go.
Watching, I was trying to get my head around, what do you call it? Determinism. And I was watching a gentleman on a TED Talk present it as though it was an exciting thing that, and just I just couldn't get there. He had really interesting concepts and stuff, and then at the end he said, "And that's exciting," and then it ended. And I was like, okay, there's no me. There's just this automaton thing. I don't know. Never mind. That was a side thing. I was just the attempts of people to try and make it sound exciting that there's no self. I personally can't relate to. Although, as I said earlier, that whole strain of thinking, it's good. It's good to go into it and to kind of let it rattle around anyway, so that you can question kind of what you are. Like how I think that people who are transgendered or things like that,
who have this necessity to examine who they are on some level have some advantages that people who think their individuality and their individualism is just innate and never question it, they don't have. I don't know if that resonates with you at all.
It does, absolutely. And what it's like, for me, becoming an individual is not just like, okay, well, when I was younger, it might be when I had hair, it was like, have purple hair. Okay, that makes you more of an individual. But on a very superficial level. Really, what we're looking at is how to bring out our potentials, to realize who we are in more emergent ways. So it's not just being an individual in any way. It's being an individual in a more emergent way, which means bringing out the deep goodness in ourselves, and then, as you said, in each other.
Right.
And my work, I'm a philosopher, but a large part of what I do is about giving people this experience of awakening to their unividuality. And one of the most powerful ways that I've been doing that for like 20 years or more is by getting people to connect. And I'll do it with just like gazing, which is amazing. Just being able to sit with somebody and just be so profoundly connected that, first of all, you really see their nature. And then the deeper place where there's one of you looking at itself. And they're both true at the same time.
Yeah, past the awkwardness.
And that's just absolute. I mean, it's exquisite. I mean, just absolutely beautiful.
That sounds so good. And I've heard you describe that actually on other things, and been thinking, man, I'd really like to try that. But I think it's also amazing because it really is coherent with your unividual philosophy, because while many people are getting into meditation these days, what I've noticed is that in conversation with another, in really reciprocal conversation with another person, there is another presence, and I think it's the oneness. There's another presence in the room, and what you're describing to me is like meditation that actually invites that other presence in as well. That presence that is not only is there a unique Aaron and a unique Tim, then there's a unique other presence in the room that's not quite the same as the presence as the oneness you might experience meditating on your own, which is I don't know if that resonates.
It is a different experience. I mean, I love meditation. I love the dissolving into the oneness on my own, but I really also love it. And there's a huge, love is the right word. When you come into communion with others, what marks it out most of all is love.
Yes, absolutely.
Huge love.
Absolutely.
And that's why, the idea of a unividual for me and it's not a dry philosophical idea.
Right.
It's really saying, find that universal love. And that where we're evolving to, where the next jump is into love, is into an unconditional, expansive, limitless love.
Yeah, which I think the more you think about it is just synonymous with life and growth. Love is, there's no difference, but in a way. So do you have
the deepest thing? Yeah.
On the practical level, then, do you have a regular practice of this gazing? Oh, let's see. You've frozen up a tiny bit. Okay, I think you're back. Do you have a regular practice of this gazing in your own life?
Yeah, but I found generally that practice. What is practice? Practice is when it's like when you play a musical instrument. You practice so you can then get on stage and play. And so what's happened for me is that over the years I've been immersed in practice, but mostly now I just play. Although having said that, my meditation practice has just gone very, very intense just recently. But before that, it wasn't. So I think for me, it's not like, I have this practice and I do it anymore. It's more like, look, right here, I'm gazing and there you are. And I'm aware, wow, now, I'm connecting with something I can't see. I'm connecting with your psyche, your soul, which is looking back at me.
Right.
And I can't see that. I just see your lovely face. But what I'm connecting with is beyond that. And if I look really deeply, the whole universe is looking at itself. And it's
Right.
happening all the time. It's just, it's always happening.
That's something that's come into my mind, probably based on some of the things, conversations I've listened to you have, is the idea of the universe viewing itself. And it actually makes perfect sense because we, through our consciousness, so I guess, if you were to have a black room, black velvet room, and shine a light into it where no light can reflect, all you would have is a little white circle where the light source was. You wouldn't fill this room with light. Whereas through our consciousness, we can actually take note of changes, and we can take note of, we can actually see the movement and the change in reality. And so, yeah, it seems like a very real and not pie in the sky kind of notion that we are the universe viewing itself. And
there's one way of seeing that idea, and where it feels like it's so completely obvious. What else could we be?
Yeah.
I mean, the universe has evolved into you and me having this conversation. It took 14 billion years to get here, and here we are. So what else could we be but the universe?
Yeah.
So we're not just the universe looking at itself. We're the universe talking about itself, having theories about itself, exploring. I mean, that's what we are. But we're an individuated aspect of this unfolding process of emergence and evolution.
No, it's really, really interesting, and I like that notion that your gazing practice is something that just probably smoothly transitioned into your daily life and into your other relationships, because it makes it less dogmatic and less formulaic, which I guess is very frustrating for some people who really would like to get there, would like to experience enlightenment. We want a formula, Yeah,
well, the practices are good. Don't get me wrong, Aaron. I spent, when I was younger, I spent long periods in meditation, 2 years at different times. And these things are good. And I run retreats where people come together, we do practices, I get people gazing. And my aim is to give people such a profound experience of what I call the deep awakening that they can then carry it out into their lives. Now, the truth is, usually what happens is they do for a bit and then they lose it. And that's because, like everything in life, you need to keep doing it.
Yeah.
But the more you keep doing it, the more it becomes natural. And that's true of everything.
Yeah. Well, and like yourself, you've ramped up your personal meditation recently, and that's due to some kind of, I'm sure, felt need on your part, some kind of I need to dive into this.
It was actually just to do with having yeah, I mean,
sorry,
it was the other way around, actually. It came and got me.
You blanked out for a second. It was to do with having a what?
It was the other way around, really, Aaron. I didn't ramp it up because I felt the need. It was the opposite way. I just had an incredibly profound experience on my own journey a couple of weekends ago, and suddenly it was like, for me, then that becomes like, I so much want to just meditate or be still and go into it.
Great.
That I just grab as much time as I can, because it's the most beautiful experience I can imagine.
Are you able to, is it too personal to ask you to describe the experience that started it?
No, I can give you a go. I can say certain things about it. Some of it is kind of still a bit close to me, but the essence of it was, I've been very, very lucky. I've had a lot of experiences over the last, starting when I was very young and all the way through my life. But this one was, in its own way, probably the most astonishing. It was a complete immersion in God. That's how I would try and describe it.
Wow.
So that Tim dissolved into this enormous presence. There was no Tim, there was no body. There was just this enormous, luminous beauty and presence. Wow. And it was something I'd never experienced in that way and with that extremity before.
Wow.
And it had a huge impact on me, and I'm still integrating that experience and and wanting to, that's why. So it's like, the meditations after that have just been like, right, I want to find that again. Whilst I haven't found that again, I have, been able to find the edges of it, and that has been beautiful in itself.
Wow, congratulations. And how awesome that a guy with a 19-year-old daughter is experiencing new highs. What a confirmation of the work that you're doing. Yeah.
It was lovely. It was lovely. It was well, more than lovely. It was lovely. It was absolutely extraordinary beyond words, Aaron.
Wow.
Is like it actually was. It was.
Well, I'm jealous in the healthiest way possible, because I had a spiritual experience that actually was the beginning of this podcast. I talked about it on the first episode of this podcast briefly, and it wasn't anywhere near what you're talking about, but it was a unique experience in that, as I mentioned before, about trying to drum up the experience. It came unbidden and was just so kind of confirming, and at the lowest ebb of my spiritual belief, basically, I had something that I had to call God speak to me. Now I don't want to ascribe a dogmatic religious definition to what that means, but it did make a change. It did make a change in even. It seemed to kind of ramp up my ability to think in a straight line, because I struggle with some attention issues, and it came with it. It came with a change that has not gone away, and it's really interesting. And so on the first episode, I don't know if you've ever heard of John Vervaeke.
I have actually. Remind me.
He's from the University of Toronto, and he's a cognitive scientist. So he has a book. He talks about awakening from the meaning crisis. That's his podcast is Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. If you two had a conversation, you and John Vervaeke, I would be, I'd have my bag of popcorn. I'd be sitting in my PJs listening to that, because that would be beautiful. But one of the things that I described this experience, and I went on, and then he said, hold on, I want to stop you there. I just want to affirm in you, he's not a religious guy at all, but that was real. What you experienced was real, because you'll get people telling you that it wasn't real in society, or I don't remember. He said it better than I am, but, and that also felt really good. And it was like in episode 1, here's somebody,
Fantastic.
confirming. And so here we go. And
good for him.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I actually really hope you guys do connect. He's amazing. Yeah. So congratulations on your on your.
The thing about them is, it feels like, the way it felt. It's like, is it? Because of these more emergent states. I don't know if this rings a bell with you, but all the way through my life, when I've hit those really deep experiences, especially this last one, I want to say it's more real. I mean, actually, I think it's all real.
Right.
And that what happens is, it's where your attention goes. So my attention was no longer on Tim. Tim was still there, obviously, because he's back here. And that's a good thing. And coming back to Tim actually was not like, oh no, here comes Tim again, I'm losing God.
Oh yeah.
It was lovely. It was like, oh, there's Tim, how nice. And a real sense of being held in this enormous love. And there was my body suddenly. It was like, oh, body, good. Yeah. And beautiful. But when my attention was catapulted away from Tim temporarily for that period, there was just this enormous, there was this enormous luminous presence.
Right.
And it was non-dual, as they say. It was just, and in that, when my attention is dissolved in it, it is the most real. Now my attention is much more back with Tim, and I'm here with you talking. Yeah. It's still there, but it's less dominant, much less dominant.
Right.
And that feels to do with, so we can see that it's all real. And the great problem with meaning is that we're not taking these profound experiences seriously. I've been exploring them all my life, so I do. But yeah, he's right. You will get people telling you that they're not real.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Yeah, it sounds like your experience was a confirmation of the larger reality, and then a confirmation of the individuality, because our consciousness, I think, our consciousness allows us to be a component of reality which can choose to engage in the movement of reality, which can choose to engage in the movement of life, and as such can really flower out in all kinds of ways that maybe nobody else can, and we can also turn on other consciousnesses, hopefully, to this larger, this unividualism. Yeah, it's a really interesting concept. So I was going to ask you to answer your own question, because you start off your podcast, the What is Life podcast, with a question that I keep expecting the person to just kind of laugh and say that's too much. But I guess because of the type of people you talk to, you say, what is life? And they actually launch off into an answer of what is life. So having done that so many times, what would be your answer to the question, what is life?
Oh, what fun. My favorite response, I think, was actually Brian Swim, the cosmologist, who did just laugh and then said some amazing things.
I didn't. Well, no, I did listen to that one. Yeah, he laughed forever. Yeah,
he laughed.
But he has that very calm, present kind of personality where he doesn't mind to take the time to laugh, which is
really
interesting.
Really.
Yeah, he seemed like he'd be a good guy to spend time with. But anyway.
Yeah, he's lovely. I really, really, really love Brian so much. What is life? Okay, so, first of all, like many of my guests, the place I have to start and end is with just mystery. That's the start, because any ideas are like dust in the face of the enormity of the mystery. But having put that as the foundation and not dismissing that, and starting from a place, I hope, of genuine humility in the face of it all, the place I've got to at the moment, Aaron, is to say that what this is we're in is a process of the realization of potentiality. And one way of getting into that is like, maybe quasi-scientific way of getting into it would be like, well, if we go back to the so-called Big Bang, the beginning of this particular universe 14 billion years ago, what can we say about where it came from? Well, nothing, except one thing. Wherever it came from, it was the potential for the universe, because the universe came from it.
Yeah.
So what seems to be happening for 14 billion years is that potentiality has been realized in ever more emergent ways, meaning it keeps becoming richer. So we've gone from hydrogen to you and me having this conversation, which is a hell of a journey over 14 billion years. So and there's something about that. Well, there's two things about it which really work for me. One is, when I look at the moment, I see that, and this can seem trivial, but I think it's deep. Every new moment is realizing a new potential. It's never happened before. So this is a new moment. Us meeting, our conversation, it's all new. It's always always new. And in that newness, we are formed. And then the other thing I notice about every new moment, and this is about the nature of time, is that every moment contains within it implicitly everything that's happened in the past.
Right.
So in this moment, there's you and I, you inviting me to be on the show, there's you watching my stuff, there's me thinking these thoughts, me writing a book, us learning language, the evolution of the human species, the creation of life on Earth, everything is required for us to have this conversation.
Right.
So there feels like, what is this? It's the realization of potentiality. And everything that is formed, there's a formless potentiality which is forming. And everything which has been formed is formed forever. And the new thing arises on the basis of that.
Yeah.
So the past keeps accumulating and forming in a new way.
Yeah.
So what we're in is a continual unfolding of possibility.
Right. Yeah.
So how about that?
That's good. That's good. Yeah. I figured you'd have an answer, and I like that a lot. I like a few things about that. It's very consonant with Rupert Sheldrake's what do you call it? Morphic resonance. To me, it sort of seems like another way to describe a similar thing. Although,
What Rupert's got really strongly is that beautiful phrase of the presence of the past.
Mm.
So he's very much got that sense of, look, the past hasn't gone.
Right.
It is informing the moment. And I think that is one of the most profound ideas and will have a gigantic impulse and impact. And Rupert is by far the most articulate spokesperson for that. And I'm very much following in his slipstream with those ideas. And I think he's done a great job.
Yeah, I mean, I don't get a sense of you being just a Sheldrake apostle. I feel, we're all following.
No, we disagree on a lot too.
Right, yeah, right.
One of the things we disagree on is, for Rupert, as for me too, up until recently, I've changed my view.
Mm-hmm.
I held a view very similar to Rupert's and most other spiritual people, that the place it's all arising from is consciousness.
Okay.
And Rupert definitely feels that, and I don't feel that anymore.
You don't feel that the place that life arises from is consciousness.
I don't think the place that the universe is arising from is consciousness. I think consciousness is arising from the universe.
Okay.
And there's a kind of, I don't know if this makes sense to you, but there's a kind of if I picture a philosophy or a picture of the way it is, like what's the ground, what's this really, whether it's God or consciousness or emptiness or anything.
Sure.
There's a sense almost of what I describe as nausea. It's like, well, why is it like that and not like something else?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, is that really true? It's like you've taken the mystery and you've gone, no, it's this.
Right.
And then it feels untrue. But when I do that, when I say, no, I think the place it's all coming from is the potentiality for everything.
Yeah.
That doesn't do that to me. There's something about that idea where you go, what else could reality be but the possibility for everything?
Right. Yeah.
And that feels a better ground for me than consciousness.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly more primordial, more base level. And I don't know that I have the tools to disagree with either view at the moment, except that to me, it feels like looking back to, or looking into reality, deep, smaller or bigger in any direction you can go. There's a fractal quality to it, where we can hit on ideas that seem foundational, but then they can kind of keep moving. And I like that you mentioned mystery, because when I hear that word, it twigs in my head an openness to continued revelation. And that's one of the things that's one of the things that,
if you can use that.
Yeah, that's one of the things that kicked me out of religion. Now, I'm still involved in some religious practices and that kind of thing, but what kicked me out of religion as being an answer to anything was that I saw very little in my tradition. I saw very little acknowledgement of the mystery and no expectation of further revelation. And that just seemed to be a stoppage of life. You know what I mean? That's a dam against, not just against philosophy, but against life itself. If you don't think things change, evolve, and that revelation happens. And the mystery has been on my mind a lot because one of the bees in my bonnet has been the epistemology of the West, and how it doesn't allow for enough mystery. It seems to me that it doesn't allow for a mystery to actually be a part of the way we know, or something. I don't. This is probably too fuzzy.
You mean with science? It doesn't allow that?
It's not. No. It's not science itself, because science itself is beautifully neutral. And beautifully open to revelation, and even the way that we form theories. It's mostly the idea that the foundations of our knowledge can't be matters of faith. They can't be matters. They can't involve mystery. We need to remove mystery. And I guess what's becoming real for me, and I'm interested in your response to this, is that I'm not sure if love can exist where there is no mystery. And so I'll describe that a little bit more, and then I'll get your reaction to it and see if I'm way off base. But when I think about, and you've kind of frozen up. Are you just listening intently, or are you frozen up? Oh, Tim, sorry, you're frozen. Interesting. Humdy-dumdy. Hello. Okay, and it's still recording.
How's that? Fantastic.
Okay, Zoom. Wow, I'm really into this Zoom thing. It's working well, except for that I got kicked out, but I think that might be where I'm sitting in my house. Okay. So the idea I was getting into...
Love needs mystery.
That love needs mystery, yeah. So I was thinking a very long time ago, before I was thinking of things in this way, I kind of realized, like, I was having the same, to be frank, I was having the same argument with my wife over and over again. And I don't think she would mind me mentioning this. I love her, and our marriage is strong. But we were having the same argument over and over again. And the temptation was there to view her as a known quantity. So, and I think that's very, very common, and almost it takes a level of intentionality to avoid it, because I was beginning to say in my own mind that she has nothing that I don't understand. I understand all the important parts, and I mean that's a road of death. And so I had to say to myself at a certain point, the best thing I can do for her is to say that I don't know her, is to communicate to her in the kindest ways I can, that I'm expecting new revelations from her. That my knowledge of her was toxic. And it wasn't her causing that. It wasn't anything that she was doing. It was in my default way of looking at the way a person. And so over time, I tried, and I'm really not trying to make myself sound, I'm giving a personal example. I don't want to make it sound like I've figured something out, but I started to expect changes and expect growth, not just, or as much as I could, to expect these things and to encourage them without being like, here's what you need to work on because I know you. And so that, I mean, we got, I don't know, she had a lot to do with it, but we got kicked out of that cycle of that perpetual argument. And so looking at everything now, there's this element of, can you love something that isn't revealed, that can't be continually revealed? Like sort of even inanimate objects, can you love, you can love a plant because it will grow. You can love, someone who doesn't play guitar will not love a guitar because they might think it's neat, and if there's a craftsmanship element, they might love it. But the people who really love guitars are people who know there's 1,000 songs in that guitar that haven't been written yet. And so that's what jumps out at me in your philosophy, is not necessarily, and no offense, it's not necessarily your answer to what life is, but it is the acknowledgement of mystery before you even got into that. And I think that if I had a gospel that I was trying to spread, it would be exactly what you just modeled in the way that you answered that question, was saying, first, let me say, there's mystery and it's beautiful. And then you went on. And I think, yeah, to me, you talk about potential and unfolding potential. A human being who thinks they know themselves to a certainty. They think they themselves are a known quantity. is it possible for them to love themselves as well as they could? Is it possible for anything to unfold out of someone who thinks they've opened all the doors to all the rooms? You know what I mean? Especially someone who's opened all the doors to all the rooms and then has depression or doesn't like themselves anymore. Is this resonating? You're nodding, so.
I think that's extraordinarily profound. There's a book I wrote a few years ago called The Mystery Experience. Mm-hmm. And what you're saying, and especially the example with your wife, I use that example, exactly that example of what happens in relationship, to point out just how important, and like you, I then lead on from that example of going, look, you know that, don't you? You know, you fall in love and the other person's a total mystery, and magic happens, and you're and it's just the best. And then over the years, you start putting them in a box until it's like, well, you would say that, wouldn't you? And all of that. And then you go, the magic's gone, we've fallen out of love. Right. And we do the same thing with life. We put it in a box. Oh, it's this is what it is. And then it goes dry on us and we fall out of love with it. And all the magic goes. So here's my, so I completely agree with you. I think it's immensely profound. No. Here's something which has been a really helpful thing to me, which may be helpful to you. It's something I call paralogical thinking.
Okay.
And paralogical thinking is based on the idea that what we're in is inherently paradoxical, because it's both two and one at the same time, because it's both one and many. It's inherently paradoxical. And we need to think in this both and way, that the opposites coexist. So what I look for always now is how the opposites coexist. So for me, it's not either a story or the mystery. It's like these two go together. But I never need to lose the mystery. It's always more. It's always beyond. Yeah. With my wife, I love that I know her so well, and I don't know her.
Right.
And she surprises me. And where is she actually going? And what will she become? And those two things go together, or my kids, or myself.
Yeah.
And also with life. And then the level of revelation, as you beautifully call it, is going up all the time. So here I am, I'm 60 years old. I've been doing this for all my life. And I'm questioning more and finding more new stuff than at any other time. And so I both feel like I know it better, and it's more profoundly mysterious than ever.
Okay.
And that when I describe that experience of going into God, you could say that was the experience of going into the mystery. What was it? I don't know. What is the potentiality that has no form? Well, it's a mystery. It's, St. Paul called it the mystery of God in which we live and breathe and have our being. I love that. Isn't that beautiful?
Not only is that beautiful, that is one of the verses I keep going back to regardless of where, how I feel about Christianity. That's one of my foundational verses. So that's beautiful. And so say the word one more time, the term that you mentioned.
I call it paralogical thinking. So monological thinking is either this or this. And that's useful a lot of the time. It's either this or it's this. But paralogical thinking is a both and. It goes, no, it's both this and this. The opposites coexist. So in the context of the other things we were talking about earlier, Aaron, about individuality, a lot of spirituality is monological. It goes, look, either it's all one or you're an individual. It can't be both. But actually it can be both. It can actually be such that we are both individuals and it's all one.
Right.
And that's the unividual understanding. And it's both of those.
That's one of the things I'm really hoping that this podcast gains an audience of people who aren't, who would not call themselves philosophers, and who don't normally, I have episodes on all kinds of other things that are much less kind of foundational than this. And a thing like paralogical, a term like that is something that if you weren't ready to hear that, it sounds kind of like philosophical mumbo jumbo, but I mean, it could if someone wasn't interested, but definitely, but it resonates.
The easy way around that. The easy way around that
Yeah.
You know, because it does sound a bit scary, it's got the word logical in. The easy way around that is just to think in terms of both and.
Yeah.
That
Yes.
it's not either or, it's both and. So look for the other pole and have that as well.
Yeah.
And it's incredibly helpful in just about everything.
Yeah.
Usually the problem is not the thing we think's the problem. The problem is we also need its opposite.
Right.
We also need, we need the other pole. And that is so often helpful.
Yeah.
And it's a very simple technique. And it means you don't have to choose. You can have them both.
Yeah, and the reason I know that it isn't mumbo jumbo is that it has that explanatory power of actually explaining something in my experience. And I encourage anyone, if anyone is listening and thinking it's mumbo jumbo, to think of the both and start walking around applying it to life, because it's a huge tension. That you think you need to go, you need to delve in one direction, and then other things are shut off. Other possibilities are no longer there. And that actually brings me organically to another thing I was going to ask you about, which is that, I listen to you and some other people speaking and get this very beautiful feeling of life and reality being a flow and a movement and being full of change and metamorphosis and evolution and all of these words that are very scary to some people. But I also have to step back with maybe this both and skepticism. It's the kindest version of skepticism. What you're saying, is like it's almost like skepticism bred of love, where you say, well, okay, I love where I am. With this both and thinking, there must also be another pole that is also a legitimate version of reality. So what I was thinking is that I was raised with a sense of the permanence of God, the immutability of God, and that actually the immutability of human nature and the unchanging nature of I guess human nature and God being the two big ones. And so there were a lot of pillars and a lot of statues erected kind of in my thinking, which I must say, the unknown God has always been one of them for me, I hope. My point is, are there people, and my intuition is yes, are there people who are optimized to live in a realm, to happily live in and breathe in a realm of permanence? You know what I mean? To experience the permanent, the things in reality that have at least the feeling of permanence, at least things that are maybe consistent enough that we can think of them as permanence. And do those people have an ability to find it's hard to say revelation, because it's almost as though revelation isn't expected, but do they have an ability to interrogate reality in a useful way that can and should be part of the conversation? Is that too vague of a question?
It's not too big of a question, but I think I might need you to say more.
Or vague, I meant, sorry.
So it's just this idea of permanence.
Yeah.
You said it, maybe it's just relatively permanent, but the idea of somebody who can see, often I think people, my sense is probably in a sense the opposite to that people, when they're less awake, live in a permanent universe.
Right.
And the more you wake up, the more fluid you see it is, and the more changing it is, and the more that you are changing. Yeah.
And I am in that same place with you. But I guess I'm just wondering in this same way, if there's another pole that that maybe allows different revelations than this pole of constant flow. Like I've done personality tests, and I know that I am an adaptable. Adaptability is probably my primary personality trait, and I not only accept change, I crave it. I resist, even in negative ways. I resist routine. and that kind of thing. And I'm just wondering if there is a way of thinking. I'm specifically thinking about people, and not just in Christianity, but people, theologically minded people who dig into reality from the perspective that God is unchanging.
Okay, I hear you. Okay.
Is there a way that can be life-giving, or is that, because my tendency is to be offended by that, and I'm just wondering if I feel the need to not go down that road, but to almost redeem that road, because it's where I came from.
So I see it. This is the way it seems to me. As I sit here with you, I am conscious that there's a flow of experience which is always happening, and it's always changing. And then there's this presence which is experiencing it, of my deep being, what used to be called spirit, essence. And it has no form. And because it's experiencing all form. And that formless presence doesn't change, because there's nothing to change.
Right.
It has no qualities other than being.
Right.
That is the connection to God.
Right.
Because God is being. And so God is for me, God is a name for the potentiality from which it's arising, and the realization to which it's going. So that it's moving towards something. So that the change is arising from the changeless. The time is arising from the timeless. Form is arising from the formless. And that didn't just happen at the beginning. It's happening now.
It's
always
constant creation, rather than 6 days.
So there's a deep.
Done.
So if you go into your deeper being in meditation or through gazing or any of those things, you find something which is completely still, because it doesn't move, because it has no qualities, and it's pure being, and there's everything is an expression of it.
Right.
And it's an immense stillness. So there is that, and it's something which is not time. It's eternal.
Right. So,
and both are present in this moment. That's the paradox. That's the paralogical thinking. It's like this is the moment is both nothing and this flow of time.
Okay. So that's a good answer. So then you're basically saying there is an element. There are permanent elements to this, and there are changing elements. And I guess my intuition is probably mostly based on the fact that, for some people like myself, like to live find it most exciting to live at the very forefront of the change, and other people find comfort in the concept of the grounding from which it's coming, the more permanent. Is that a thing?
Or I would say, yes, I think that's true. I think you're definitely right. And I think that is a personality type, and you can see it reflected in everything. Politics, for instance, people who want to rush forward, people who want to, hold on and be careful, and all of those things. But I think for me, what I'm saying is, look, there is something formless which doesn't change, because it can't. There's nothing to change. And then there's the flow of change. And the flow of change is a whole spectrum. So the nature of a hydrogen atom hasn't changed really since the beginning. That's stayed the same. The more primitive things stay the same. But once they reach the level of emergence of you and me, we're changing all the time, aren't we? Look, I'm changing, you're changing, the whole conversation. And once you go into soul, into this non-material realm of ideas, it's changing like crazy. Yeah. But my computer hasn't changed much. The tables stayed pretty stable.
Right.
So the more foundational elements are like, well, Rupert Sheldrake would call them, the habits or laws of nature. They're established.
Yeah.
And they have a continuity. And then that's led to this greater level of change.
But he also says they're more like habits. So I guess he has a sort of, he has a faith that even the fundamental laws of nature over a long enough time span will change. Or I think that's what I read.
Or certainly could. I mean, the lovely idea he's got there, and it comes from Peirce, American philosopher originally, is this idea that the laws aren't, what Rupert was the first person actually I ever heard pointed out, although I don't think it comes from him, is that it's a metaphor. we think of the laws of nature and we don't hear the word laws, and it comes from the idea that there's God and God is proclaiming the laws
Right.
and then
Yeah.
enforcing them. But of course, that's just a metaphor. And
Yeah.
actually, it works much better to think
Yeah.
of the universe learning
Yeah.
and falling into habits.
Yeah.
And then there's some very primal habits, which are the fundamental laws. And then there's new habits, like, like I have a habit. I talk like this because of my habit. You talk like that because of your habit.
Yeah.
And so
Is it one thing that comes to mind as you're describing this kind of the more primitive things are less changing, and the and then we move into like forward into the change, is an idea, a concept of home. I'm going to see if I can express it properly, but I feel like we have different experiences of the concept of home. For many people, that unchanging, that home needs to be a primordial, unchanging place. I don't know if this is something that, and life is a necessary movement away from home into change, and maybe we return home. Whereas other people, like myself, I feel like I'm always on my way. I'm always on a journey to home, and home is actually my full potential or something, and the full potential of my children and my wife, and that we actually embody home the more we delve into that. I don't know if that makes any sense.
yeah, I think it's beautiful. A home's a lovely word, isn't it? And
Yeah.
one of the things I love in the mystical poets, Rumi, for instance, but many others, where they invoke that feeling of home. And there's a longing, I think, in most spiritually awake people, that kind of longing for home, and all those beautiful songs that are written, to come home. And you're right, it's a big thing in us. And my sense is it's because the home is well, I think the experience I had a couple of weeks ago, that's home. And when you touch that immersion in something greater than yourself, into that enormous love, into God, it's like, oh yeah, this is where, and I think it's the feeling of this is where I belong. So I had my first awakening when I was 12, and it really did feel like coming home. It felt like, wow, I was, this is so beautiful.
But there was a timeless element, if I'm not mistaken. You weren't defining that experience you had as being a return to where you were, or a full all the way to the end of the line to where you will be. It kind of, both of those things were in one, and because
you come out of your attention comes out of that flow of change and time, and there's a feeling of, oh, this is, and I think it's really a metaphor. It's obviously, home is a metaphor, isn't it? And it's a metaphor for the place where you belong, where it feels right. And my experience when I was 12, and it's been, whenever I've touched it ever since, is that the only time I feel that is when I'm immersed in this enormous love. When this enormous love arises, it feels like home. It feels like this is where I should be. Yeah. Everything makes sense. I can't tell you what that sense is, but it does. Yeah. And at any other time, it doesn't. And that's home, that enormous love.
That's great. I think there's a corollary, like people, I mean, what you are describing is something that I think, sadly, very few people, myself included, experience. And we get glimpses of it, though. We get little explosions of it, maybe when we love the people in our lives well, and when we, and I wouldn't, by the way, I'm not claiming that your experience, I would imagine it wasn't divorced from all the love for all the people in your life.
No,
that love was all present there as well. So I'm not saying you're selfishly moving aside from reality and everyone else is experiencing that through their loved ones. But yes, it's kind of an interesting thing. I think of William Blake, and the way that he experienced reality, the way that he experienced God. And actually, your interview with Dahmer,
Bruce
Dahmer, yeah,
Bruce Dahmer.
Dahmer. Was he was a William Blake like character, where the veil of reality was very thin, and those moments, which for most people are flashes, almost like a brief flash, can be entered into on a deeper level, sometimes without, well, in his case, it seems like even without a great effort almost on his part. But I don't really know where I'm going with this exactly, except that I would like to experience what you experienced with that.
Well, one of the things, unfortunately, I wish if you were living in the UK, and if you could get to the UK, I do these what I call deep awakening retreats, and I've got one planned. I do come to the States, but I've got no plans at the moment. I'm going to Japan, and I've got one over New Year in England. Mm-hmm. And what astonishes me, I would never have believed it was true, but nearly every single person can experience that enormous oneness and love. And it's through connection. I just set up this situation where we can relax, we can let ourselves be as we are, don't have to pretend to be spiritual, all of that nonsense, and then enter this deep communion with each other. And the love which arises is so big and thick, it kind of feel it in every cell in your body. And it's a delight. I love doing the philosophy. I do. I really, it's a privilege. But that's the foundation, is offering people that experience. And just to see people touch it and how profoundly it changes us. Yeah. And it's right there, and it's not far away. It's not.
I have that sense. I have that sense that it's not far away.
It's not. It's right next door. And it can happen at any moment. It may happen to you tonight. It's like you can, and I've seen that a lot of times too, where suddenly people have, and I've been lucky enough to have people. Oh, I can remember from right back. One of my early girlfriends, at university, be having this exact conversation with her, and her going, "I don't know what you're talking about," and then 12 o'clock that night, this bang on my door. It's happened. There she was, right in this enormous love. I can remember walking into Kathmandu with a young guy I met on a bus. Same thing. What are you talking about? And it happened while we were there. And bang, there it was. He was in it. Yeah. And so, it's a breath away.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting part of your career that I also was thinking of touching on. It organically came up, the notion of or the spiritual practice that you are actually engaging in and bringing other people into, and I find that interesting. I find that interesting because I do think that we need to address spirituality and the crisis of meaning that many people are experiencing. I do have an intuition that some kind of spirituality is necessary, and that spirituality needs more neutrality than most religious institutions are. Neutrality in terms of like religious neutrality. It needs more like I listen to evolutionary spiritualists and things, and it's very resonant. So but what comes to my mind, and maybe you have a thought about this, is that the one thing it's missing, the one thing that this what feels like a very fresh wave of spirituality that you're engaged in, it may be missing a unified mythology. Does that resonate with you at all? Is there a solution to that, or is it not an issue?
Yeah. No, it's a massive issue. It's a massive issue. So for me, there's two sides. The one is the experience. That's the foundation, the mystery, the love. Yeah. The point where you just go, it's beyond words. And then I think you're exactly right. We need a unified mythology. We need a new story. Mm-hmm. Now, all of the great religions are all there because at a certain point in history, other individuals, just like you and me, went, we need a new story. And then they took what they had, the past, and they turned it into a new story. And what we need to do now is the same. And what we need is a story which can encapsulate the depth of perennial spirituality and bring it into harmony with modern science. So we have one positive narrative which helps us understand the nature of chemistry and the evolution of the soul and life after death and God, and it's all one story. So what I'm engaged in, and where all my attention is, it's on my screen over here right now, it's what I was doing before we started, we'll probably do some more when we leave, is to try and develop that story. So Unividualism as a philosophy is my contribution to that, is to try to develop my latest book, Soul Story, is that. It's the
Yeah.
beginnings of trying
Okay.
to articulate a narrative. And we
That's
need it. And we need one which will give us meaning, because at the moment, the choice is between old religious narratives, which really, if I'm honest, there's some beauty in them, but they're past their sell-by date.
Hmm.
They're old. They need
Yeah.
to evolve. And then on the other hand, we've got modern science, which is incredibly powerful in its
Yeah.
ability to technology and understanding, but it is essentially meaningless.
Right.
It offers us a universe which has no meaning.
Yeah, and
actually, the
not
universe
even
is full
in
of meaning.
not even in a negative way. It's just not. It's not a meaning creation engine. Science.
It can't do it. But what it leaves us with is something negative, because once you've got over the wonder of science, like the wonder of the universe, and it's all great and wonderful, but the small print underneath all of that is, oh, and by the way, a clever monkey clinging to a rock in a meaningless universe which goes on and on and on with emptiness forever, and you're here for a couple of minutes and then you're gone.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
And if you live with that, you're living a meaningless life.
Well,
and I don't believe it's true. I think it's actually profoundly mistaken.
I don't think. Yeah, I agree with I agree that it's not a meaningless life. I guess I'll run something by you as well that came to mind while you were thinking, and get your reaction. Which is that. Okay. So I went through a period of great skepticism regarding stories and narrative, which I think was just a natural part of my journey, where I was so frustrated that everyone was turning their life into a story, because I could see the self-tyranny, and I could see the influence of culture and the influence of oppressive forces in the story of themselves that they were telling. And while I've come to a place where I realize narrative is just a natural human institution, it's just a reality, I still have skepticism, and I love the idea of a unifying story that you're putting forward. But what I've been experiencing myself is, I guess I'm fortunate in that when I was raised, I think it's just a personality quirk. When I was raised with the Bible, there was always a feeling in the back of my head, because enough of it worked, enough of it resonated with me, that I knew it wasn't bad, but the notion was always there that this is just the beginning. This is in its best moments, when it connects with my consciousness in a certain way, is giving me a glimpse of something real. In its best moments, not always, not all the way through, and not necessarily on a literal track. But as I have become more heretical in my thinking, the Bible has not. There's been a freshness that I think may go away again. It could be ebbs and flows. And what I'm wondering is if there was a way to communicate to people, maybe a more open and a more mystery soaked epistemology, a more open way of defining knowledge itself, if we wouldn't be giving people kind of goggles through which to read many different traditions. And I don't think this is even an unusual idea. I think that is what we're doing. And like, the Bible does say in many spots, kind of almost annoyingly repetitively, says seek wisdom, and that's one of the things that has. I'm not saying it's owned by Christianity or anything like that, but as I have sought wisdom, I feel like I've been creating a lens through which to view things like the Bible, and wisdom has dramatically shifted my view of the Bible, my view of other philosophical streams, of other religions that I'm not as educated about as I would like to be. But you start to see God in stories everywhere, leaping out. And I guess if I feel like I have a mission, that's one of the things I'd like to do is to actually set up that lens, because I can't picture an actual mythology taking place. If it does, this would be beautiful. But I can't picture the genesis of a new mythology for spirituality that would be it could be appropriate for now. It could be what we need for now, but I almost feel like frustrated in advance about the ways that new mythology will age. Do you know what I mean? And it feels
Well,
like
I think there's two
it
things
feels
with
like a
it,
cycle.
Aaron. The first thing is what we've already touched on, is that the new understanding has to be paralogical. It has to be both and.
Mm-hmm.
So it has to root itself in mystery.
Mm.
So here's the mystery about which we tell stories. And we need both. If I lived just in the mystery, I'd be an amnesiac. I wouldn't know how to get to my house out of my office. It's like we need the story, but also we need to see that the story is a story. It's not the thing itself. It's not life, or it's
right.
a way of understanding life. So
Yes.
what we need to do then is to find the best story. Now, the new mythology, if that's the right word, is not going to come from spirituality. It's going to come from science. We already have it. But for 100 years, we've had this incredible story of the evolving universe,
Sure.
and it really works. That's the story. That's the one that's going to take us forward. What we need to do is link that story, what science does, because it's only looking at the objective world and because it looks at what it can measure. It takes us through the evolution of matter and the evolution of life, and then just where it reaches the evolution of soul, it stops. And it goes, and that's a byproduct of biology. Well, it isn't.
Because it's a system of measurement. Science
it can't measure that.
And it can't measure it. Yeah.
So epistemology can't do that.
Right.
So what we need to do is go, the evolutionary process didn't stop there. From inert matter came life. From life came psyche. And psyche is a whole dimension of reality. It's a non-material dimension. We're in it right now.
Yeah.
And spirituality is all about that. It's the realm of the soul.
Right.
And there is already a narrative which we can use, which can link all of that together. And then we can take the wisdom of the past and see it in a new way.
Yeah.
And bring it to life again.
Well, I'll tell you why that resonates with me. An interesting thing that's happened to me slowly is it won't be, and I'm sorry to keep mentioning my personal history, but it won't be surprising.
No, it's lovely. I love it.
It won't be surprising to you to hear that the young Earth creationism was where I came from, and that evolution, even the word when applied to other things, was always viewed with more than great skepticism in my past, and I have honestly struggled, even as I have begun to trust many people who believed in evolution. I'm putting my cards on the table. I have struggled to believe in evolution. It's been hard for me to do. And the weird thing is that my actual belief in evolution came through this philosophical journey. And I think maybe it was because I didn't have the resistance. I didn't have the resistance to the idea of evolution in the realm of psyche, in the realm of the soul. So as I've just tried to openly interrogate reality, it's come to my attention that evolution is happening. You can see it happening. I came to believe in evolution through philosophy, not through any scientific argument that anyone ever gave me. And so that's consonant with what you're saying about the evolution of the spirit and the evolution of the soul. So I don't know if that resonates with you at all.
So where would you say you are now with evolution? Just so I'm absolutely clear.
Yeah, no, I believe in evolution. So first of all, I believe in physical and biological evolution, though it's not a primary area of interest for me. So my understanding of it is it will grow, and my belief will change. But I guess I was just surprised that what brought me to that place was actually observation of the soul and of the psyche and of psychology, and just realizing how baked into that evolution is. Like seeing
what I love about it, Aaron, is that sense in which I look around me now and I can see all the levels of evolution with me, and it explains that. And it just goes, look, It started from the simplest, and it became more and more complicated and richer. And I look at my body, and it contains all of these different cells, which contain chemicals made in stars, and the whole thing is here.
Yeah.
Evolution isn't gone; it's right here.
Yeah, it's consonant with this non-dual version of life and reality that you've been describing. And
I think so. And so for me, it's like we are in a process which has come from this potentiality, reaching ever towards a greater realization. And that greatest realization, in fact, is what I mean by God. It's like that's where we're heading. To the deepest realization you can think of, and that's all one beautiful unfolding. And the real thing I love about it, and this is my real interest in in meaning, is it's totally redemptive. Because if we are constantly moving towards a more emergent, not in a straight line, of course, but generally, we're moving towards a more emergent future because of the accumulation of the past. There's a tendency towards greater wisdom, towards a better future. If that's what's happening, then the suffering of the present is redeemed because where we're going is better.
Right.
And that's why I think God redeems everything, because that love to which we're going redeems the struggles in which we're in.
Right. And I think through consciousness, the beauty of it also is that through consciousness, we can actively choose to individuate, to become more ourselves, to do those things that make us feel the most ourselves. And then we can actually feel that we are a part of that movement, and that movement towards God, that we are accelerating that movement towards God in the universe. So, we've been talking.
There we go. We've arrived. That's the place to arrive.
Yeah,
that's
very,
it. The
very
whole point
interesting
for me of the philosophy is to get us to the place where we can understand the majesty of what we're in, the epic nature of who we are.
Yeah,
we are the universe waking up to itself.
Yeah,
and that this life we're in, it doesn't end with death. The truths of spirituality are not disproved by science; they can sit alongside science, and that we are in the process of unividuating.
Yes.
Of realizing that by being these individuals, Tim and Aaron, and meeting, we can commune as something greater than ourselves.
Yeah.
And it's so thick with meaning.
Yeah. No, it sounds amazing. Thing. And I can say, if I could go to England and take part in one of your classes, I certainly would. What I do pledge to do, because I've been honest with you, that I reached out to you the minute I discovered your stuff. So I haven't read your books yet. I'm excited to read those, and I'm going to go ahead and recommend them, even though I haven't, to anyone listening, to check out more of what you're thinking and saying. And certainly I would love to make a pilgrimage to try that at some point, but I don't know if that's in the cards.
Well, one of the things which I do, which might be, is I have an organization called the International Community of Unividuals, which I like because it shortens to the ICU, and what we do is gazing. But the International Community of Unividuals, which is an online thing. So tomorrow I'm going to be connecting with people all over the planet, literally, not a big group, but a small group all over the planet. And we will be gazing online, we'll be talking philosophy, and we'll be exploring this vision of how we can unividuate together. And
Wonderful.
That's a beautiful thing. And that's something which becomes accessible to anyone. Awesome.
Well, I hope this is encouraging to you, and it's been very encouraging to me. And I really appreciate you taking the time to
it's been a real pleasure.
Likewise. And I always ask everyone, is it all right if I post this online, after having the conversation? You're okay with that? Okay. I like to be
definitely, but thank you for asking.
Upfront. Yeah, no problem. I always think it's possible someone might say some things and be like, well, I'd rather it didn't go. But much appreciated.
Lovely to connect with you.
Thank you very much, Tim. And
go well on your journey.
You also. Thank you.